Hello everybody, it's me, Root Beer. We are in a hotel right now because Atlas's fiance kicked us out of the apartment.
You make it sound so, like, negative. She was having her bachelorette party, alright?
Yeah, and she threatened Atlas that she shouldn't be there when she got home.
And I'm dying, so that's cool.
Yeah, so we're back from day one of BCS Anaheim. We were playing Standard today. I was on Omina Grugio, and Atlas was on forgetting his wallet at home, so he had to go back and miss check-in.
Yep.
So yes, here is my deck list. So first up, I am running the Almagestar starter because cute anime girl, and then the rest of it we're just running standard ride line. So the Crow, which is act ability, you Soul Blast 1, check top 5 for Omina Grugio. If you whiff, you can Soul Charge 2. The Owl is on play, you can search your deck for one trigger, put it in your Soul. If you put something in Soul, you can draw a card. And then Omina Grugio itself is on play, search top 5 for the Mask of Hydrangum or an Omina Grugio. And then act ability, you can Soul Blast 1, bind a trigger from your drop zone, and your opponent can't activate the power gain of that trigger type. Yeah. Oh, no, it's actually for any card in the bind zone. Interesting. I've never been on the original Omina Grugio long enough to actually know what it does aside from binding a trigger. Anyways, the star of the show is Omina Grugio Masks. So you remove a card with Omina Grugio and its different name, bind a trigger from your drop zone, and then it gets red text. All of your opponent's card with the same trigger icon lose 5,000 shield, and your opponent can't increase their power by those trigger effects. And then, once per turn, at the end of battle attacks, you counterblast 1, put a back row rear guard into Soul, stand it, and it gets drive -1 until end of turn. So he's your big playmaker, he's your guy. The minus 5,000 shield is actually very annoying for a lot of people because power in Standard scales really quickly, especially because this is a mask deck and you're basically guaranteed Persona Ride, at least for the first time. And so, you know, you're going to be swinging in for like 25, 30k when your opponent's on like 10k shields if you're binding crits or heals that everyone plays, so it gets really annoying really fast. Okay, next up, I am running 3 copies of Skull Kemda, the Dragon Tree Wretch Grade 2, the one that searches out the mask. It's hard to tell because I also have exactly 1 frame rare from when I pulled the case, and that footage got corrupted, rest in peace. So yeah, 3 Skull Kemdas, and then 3 copies of the actual like mask itself, and again it's all in separate places because I have 1 frame rare copy. So because Omina Grugio just absolutely needs to do the mask thing, or else you only have the ability to like disable the power gain without like restanding your Vanguard or neutering the shield power, I am just playing 6 copies of the mask effectively to try and find it as much as possible. Also, you know, because this is custom built to be like a mask deck, unlike everything else where the mask was added on later, Dragon Tree markers are nice, just having that little bit extra 5k. I haven't thought about how I'm going to change this for set 13 yet, but, you know, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Next up, we are running 4 copies of Misery Wings, so this is a grade 2, gets 5k for each trigger icon in the bind zone, and then on play, if you have 2 or more trigger icons in the bind zone, Soul Blast 2, draw a card. So this is the big beater of the deck, he does a lot of work. At minimum, most times you'll have at least 2 triggers, so it's just like a 20k, 30 with Persona Ride, goes up to like 35 if you have Dragon Tree markers, so very powerful card. Unfortunately, I did not draw this card for like half of my games. They just kept like going into damage or disappearing into the void.
So are you saying it was inside you all along?
Yeah, the true Misery Wing was never drawing this card.
So much better.
let's see. I am running 2 copies of Laymina, so this is the cycle card from set 10, the ones where, like, when discarded during the ride phase, you Soul Blast, draw a card, bottom deck them. And then Laymina specifically is when you Persona Ride, on play, Counterblast 1, you can call something from Soul to Rearguard Circle, and then Soul Charge 1. Also, I'm just noticing now that the soul charging is optional. I've been, like, doing it every time because I thought it was mandatory. Like, I was having problems all day of, like, getting very close to deck out. All of my games ended when I had, like, 6 cards in deck, and a couple of them did go to deck out, at least for my opponents. So, reading, yay, but I am playing Laymina because it's useful for discarding early, as just one of, like, many things you can discard. One of the nice things about Omina Grugio is because you're always having to discard for your ride deck, and you have to think about, like, what if I, like, draw something I really want? Do I want to, like, discard this and hope I draw into, like, more copies of it? But this deck, you have, like, the Mask, where if you already have Omina Grugio Mask in hand, you can discard the Mask order, and that's fine. You can still ride. You can also just discard Omina Grugio itself, because more than likely you're just going to remove it for the, like, mask effect of Omina Grugio Mask. So just having, like, more things that I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll discard this, made the thinking process for this deck a lot easier, which is something I like. Any opinion on that, Atlas?
You just called yourself dumb.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, having to think less is probably a good thing when you're in, like, a high-stress environment, right?
There's that, and then just, like, you get, grinded down over the course of the day. You know, like, your mental acuity starts to deteriorate. Like round 4, round 5, round 6.
Yeah. Because I know, like, playing other decks, I remember one time at Locals, I was playing Bastion, and I discarded a copy of Alden because I'm like, I play 4 of this. Surely, within the, like, 3 or 4 cards I'm going to see over the next couple turns, I'll just find another one. I did not find another one. So, the fact that this deck just has, like, 8 cards that I'm perfectly willing to discard is great. Yeah. Next up, for the grade 1s, we have 4 copies of Ruin Collector, so on play you may soul charge 1. Very important, I did not soul charge with this card at all throughout the entire day, because every time this was coming down, I'm just, like, very conscious that I'm going through my deck so quickly, because you're, like, constantly searching out the masks, searching out Omina Grugio, drawing cards, and so, like I said, every time I was always on, like, 6 cards by the end of the game, so I'm just like, I cannot be soul charging with this, even though, like, you kind of need soul to, like, draw with Misery Wing, but, you know, kind of depending on what you do early, you like, I usually ended up with enough soul. So, I was also running 2 copies of Gungram in this list. Originally, I was running the Almagestar grade 1, I think I have a physical one here with me.
Show off.
This card. So, I was originally running that, but when I played at Locals, I kept running into situations where I was like, I don't have the trigger in Soul, or, like, having to be conscious about the one trigger you get off of Omina Owls when you ride up to grade 2. It's like, can be difficult, and then I'm also having to, like, finagle around having the 2 trigger icons if I want to draw off of Misery Wing. So it just put me in a position where it was like too much thinking, too much resource management, and then in later turns I often just didn't have the trigger in Soul, so it was like, is it worth doing this when it doesn't really help accelerate the binds? So I don't know. I kind of go back and forth on it, because I think there were, like, a couple situations where, like, I maybe could have used this to accelerate my binds instead and maybe put more pressure on my opponent. I did use the draw effect of Gungram a decent amount. Never drew into anything good with it. I do feel like today I got punished a lot for drawing cards. But we'll get to that when I recap my actual matches. And then, of course, 1 copy of Kato, because cat. And only the 1 copy because you have to remove Omina Grugios, which means you're only going to have 3 ride line cards to work with. I also drew the cat every single game. It's Barber's Law. You run the 1 copy.
Yeah.
You run the 1 copy, you always see it. Okay. And then, of course, 4 Sentinels, so 3 regular PGs, 1 Sanctitude. I'm running different arts because I can. If I had the Chronojet PG, I would just be running 4 different PGs right now. I am also running all different arts of heal triggers because I can. I run the restanding heal trigger because I was thinking about like what I could potentially run into, and I was thinking like, okay, Bastion is like probably a decent pick that restands. Greedon has been topping a lot very recently leading up to Anaheim, so I was like, okay, Greedon restands, so that's another one. What else is there? Minerva is a deck that kind of came back up, so that restands. Draconic Overlord just seems like an eternal like tier 2 pick, so that restands. So I was just thinking like, alright, a lot of the decks with crits are like less relevant now. Like Gondiva got hit, so not as many people are going to be on it, and so I figure like the crit heal isn't very worth it, but there are a decent number of decks that restand. Also, like the off chance I run into the mirror, that's another like restanding Vanguard where this might have value, so I decided on 3 vanilla heals, 1 restand heal. The restand heal barely came up, and in fact my first round was actually against Gondiva, and then almost immediately followed that up with Bavsagra, so maybe I should have kept crit heals, who knows. After that, I am running 7 crits. It's hard for me to keep track because I ran a bunch of different arts, and I do in fact have one of the like signed Bang Dream crits that I got because I got a case of set 11.
Show off.
Yeah. I'm not going to dig through my deck box for the actual physical copy. After that, we're running 2 each of fronts and draws just to like grab the spectrum of triggers to be able to tailor it to my opponent's lineup. So unfortunately I only have one of the effect front that has the 20k shield, but because this deck can just filter triggers out, a lot of the time if I'm like, I want to grab a front trigger right now, I would just grab the vanilla one, and then Barber's Law, because I'm only running 1 copy of Natalia, I always drew it. So yeah, that is the deck list. I really like Omina Grugio. I think this is a really fun deck. I really like the gimmick of being able to like disable the triggers. It takes some of the RNG out of the game. It does have some issues where because you're filtering out your own triggers, at least a little bit, I felt like I wasn't triggering as often, and like I said, today was an experience of being punished for greed a lot because I kept drawing into like various triggers whenever I would draw cards. And in fact, that will be a story of one of my rounds, so let's go over my round, shall we? Round 1, I played against Gondiva. I went second, and I won that one. They just couldn't get to the 5 cards bound turn 3. Was it a ban or a limit to 1? Either way, the hit to that 1 grade 3 does significantly like reduce their ability to bind cards. So they got to like 4, and then I think they were gonna do like Alpha Car, the one that like binds itself to attack again, but they went first, so they couldn't actually do that because it has to attack a grade 3. So they just couldn't get to 5 binds, and then from there they just never really built up momentum. They also didn't draw very many cards because they didn't see Best Harvest. I also wasn't committing much to the board to begin with. I think they whiffed a couple times using the Gondiva skill. They would reveal like a bunch of triggers, and then they would have to reshuffle their deck. So I think like overall the Gondiva player just couldn't get the momentum they needed. Round 2, I played against Bavsagra, another deck with a critical on their Vanguard. Yay, I'm definitely not regretting my trigger choices right now. Anyways, this was a good back and forth. We had a very long game. We went into time and my opponent eventually decked out. So I saw all of my PGs like pretty early into the game. I think by the time they got to their grade 3 turn, I was only on like a 2 damage. I usually had to take early damage because I wanted to use Skull Kemda, but you know, early on I was like 2 PGs in hand. I was already feeling pretty good because Bavsagra is a 3 attack deck, and one of them was Sanctitude, so I knew at some point I could bypass the like battle door effect on the axe. So it was a long grindy game, but ultimately because Bavsagra is a 3 attack deck, it just couldn't mount up pressure against me when I had all of that shield value. Round 3, I lost against Lyons, so the person I played against ended up going undefeated in Swiss. I don't know what their record is at the time of recording this video, because we left after we left like as top 8 was starting, because we wanted to go get dinner. So I'm recording this the night of. I haven't seen the results of top 8 yet. I don't know where they ended up placing. Maybe I'll like edit in the tweet later whenever Fuzzy Paradox makes his pie chart. But yeah, they played super aggressively. They had the combo where they were playing In Search of an Ideal Far Away, so it's like the gold Magnolia order that you give a 1 unit red text that gains 5k every time a different unit attacks. So what they do is they give it to one of their back row, and then they called Rosarium Fairy, which can copy the power of something from the back row. So you know, the unit would just be gaining like 5k, 5k, 5k every time they attack, and they're making 5 attacks because it's Leonore Mask. So it's like plus 25 on this back row unit, and the Rosarium Fairy is also getting bigger and bigger. And they also had 2 Rosarium Fairies. So, yeah, they rode up to the mask, called 2 Rosarium Fairy, activated the order, and then I died. Round 4, I played against Zorga. I won that one. They bricked. They did not have any orders early, so they had to like discard 2 off of their ride line. They couldn't alchemagic at all. Like they summoned like one of their prison dragons, but then they just had to give it the power because it wasn't strong enough to be worth giving the crit. And then they just like died on when I rode up into my mask unit. My opponent was also kind of a bummer that round. Like, they just seemed kind of annoyed to be there. Or, like, they weren't talking very much. They just kind of seemed, like, very, And, you know, every time they would, like, shuffle up my deck or cut my deck after I shuffled, they, like, slam it back down on the desk. So, that was just kind of an unpleasant game. I felt a little bad just because they, like, bricked so hard, but also, like, eh. Round 5, I lost versus Chronojet, so this was like the one game that kind of felt out of my control. This one I bricked, so I didn't see my Skull Chemdas early, which means I couldn't put on the early pressure. I did luckily just like draw into one of the Mask of Hydragium, so at least didn't brick that far. And then at the same time, I drew 1 Misery Wing early, and no other time. So I had the 1 Misery Wing that got spun back into my deck, and then I just didn't see them ever again. At one point I had to call a critical trigger just to like make pressure on my opponent, and I think at that moment we both knew the game was over. Round 6, I played against Greedon, and this was a really weird game. My opponent bricked early. They did not have Greedon Mask. I went first that game. So, like, they couldn't do their play. And then when they were doing their very sad, like, attack with Greedon, because that's, like, all they could really do, I hit defensive OT. And then next turn, they hit their defensive OT when I went into Omina Grugio Mask. And then we both just kind of kept healing throughout the game. And like, it just kept going and going and going. I don't think I ever went past, like, 4 damage because I healed myself back down out of it. And then, you know, because it's Greedon, they don't lose till 7. So, like, neither of us were ever close to lethal. And then, eventually, because Greedon has a card that, like, gives it extra drives, and it doesn't lose drive checks when it restands, whereas I do, they started going through their deck faster than I was, and they decked out first. Round 7, I lost against Eva, so this was a really good back and forth match. It went down to the wire. I think we were both down to about 6 cards in deck. Ultimately, my luck was a little bit worse. I think I had like a 6-card deck with 5 triggers in it, and I did not hit them, whereas my opponent, like, they got their OT, so it's hard to be mad about that because deck thinning is like half the strategy for Eva. It was just kind of that case of like, alright, my luck was a little bit worse. It happens. So I didn't feel as bad about that one compared to like the Chronojet game. And then round 8, I was against Overlord. They bricked, didn't put up any pressure, and then just kind of died. It was a very anticlimactic final round. So overall, I went 5-3. I had a pretty good time. I feel a little bad about, like, the Chronojet and EVA games. Those both felt like I could have feasibly won that. I think the game against Leonore, where I got completely blown out, like, I didn't have a PG to be able to, like, stop their 60k Leonore, but at the same time, it's like, with Rosarium Fairy getting so fuck huge as they went on with the Order, it's like, even if I had a PG for that, I don't think I was surviving. So that was one game where it's like, okay, they just completely blew me out. There was nothing I could do about that. The other two was like, okay, there was a little bit of, like, luck involved. If, you know, the cards came down a little different, I might have been able to get in there, like, 7-1, but, you know, at the end of the day, it is what it is. So, I had a good time. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing Premium. I am going in with a half-assed Jewel Knight list that I threw together today. And Atlas, you're going to be playing Great Nature?
You got it.
So, yeah. By the time this goes up, we will be done with BCS, because we're in a hotel right now, and I'm not uploading something on crappy hotel Wi-Fi. So, you'll probably see this all on Monday after the whole event is over.
Yeah.
But...
like, this is... Well, Millista is still technically legal for a couple more weeks, so, like, why would you not phone it in, right?
Yeah. I mean, if I run into a mill deck, I might just, like, drop the tournament right then and there if I lose to it.
Round 1, fight.
I mean, that basically happened to me last year during BCS, where I was pretty confident going into it, because I did really well during Shop Challenge, and then I went, like, X5 or something like that. No, I went X3, and one of those was my opponent no-showing. So, you know, like, my experience with Premium BCS has not been great in recent memory. But yeah, that's gonna be it for this one. There'll probably be 2 separate videos, like one for Standard, one for Premium. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Like and comment and all that good stuff.
Subscribe to our Patreon or something. Thank you to our patrons.
Yep.
You do the patron names, because I don't remember it off the top of my head.
Darren, Cole, Josh, Jeremy, GR, Ali. And all form the head. I'm tired. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Atlas is, like, getting over being sick. He's still coughing.
Yep.
Thank you for watching, everybody. Bye-bye. My mouse is not plugged in.